Mayor and Council, thank you. This is a public hearing. Before we get started, we're going to have a presentation from Mary Ipple from Briggs & Morgan and Tom Vanaway from Springstead. Give you some background on the TIF plan. There are three actions for you tonight. Gail's here to talk about the interfund loan agreement. If you have questions on that. But this is for a 400,000 square foot research and development laboratory. Mr. Doyle Shea from 3M is with us tonight and can answer any questions about 3M. This facility is estimated $156 million and to house 700 employees. I heard a number today, Council, and I want you to understand what that number is. There's an agreement, and Mary and Tom maybe can expand on it, or Doyle can confirm that. The average salary for those 700 employees is $50 per hour. That's in the agreement. Exactly. So 700 employees at $50 per hour. I believe that is a requirement of the agreement. That's a subsidy agreement, and that's a number that I believe was agreed to today. And so you have the agreements in front of you that Mary's going to talk about and Tom is going to talk about. But understand that, again, tonight you have to make a decision on tax equitable financing. But for this money, this facility would not proceed as proposed. So that is what 3M testified. That's what the legislation says. And those 700 employees, with that average salary, are what's going into this facility. So we as staff recommend this. We think it's a great achievement for our community, a great investment for our community, and a great commitment by 3M. We have a very good partnership. And so with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Danaway, who's going to walk us through the presentation which he has handed out.
Thank you, Mr. All, members of the City Council. As Chuck mentioned, you should have copies of the presentation in front of you. As well as that, we've got updated copies of the development agreement. We did finalize that job wage number today, so there's an updated version of that in front of you, as well as an updated modification of the development program. That was a slight change as a result of the Planning Commission meeting last week that we updated. As mentioned, my name is Tom Denaway. I'm with Springstead Incorporated. I am here on behalf of the City Council. We have been assisting the city with the preparation of the TIF district, the negotiation of deal points, and then the preparation of the TIF plan and the tax increment revenues. The purpose for my being here tonight is to provide, or the presentation, to provide an overview of the facility that's being proposed, outline the details of the special legislation that was previously discussed, that was approved this spring, outline the project area and the TIF district area, talk about a couple of the major components of the TIF plan, as well as some of the development agreement findings and terms that have been in front of you, and also to outline the statutory findings that are outlined in the resolutions that you guys have in front of you that you will be deciding upon tonight. As previously mentioned, the project is approximately a 400,000 square foot research and development laboratory to be built on the 3M campus. The estimated total cost of the project, total private investment, is $156 million, and it's estimated to be constructed over a 2-year period. The new facility will be used to house up to 700 employees, and is projected to be constructed on a new parcel that is approximately 28 acres, which is within the current 3M campus parcel. We'll get to why that's important a little bit later. As mentioned, the company is seeking TIF assistance to assist with the cost of redeveloping the facility and the existing campus and the construction of the new facility. In addition to that, the city is also looking to fund approximately $1.25 million worth of TIF-eligible site and utility expenses associated with the new fire station. We can use TIF dollars to build public improvements associated with the fire station, but we can't use it to fund vertical buildings itself. But there is a number of costs associated with the fire station that TIF will be eligible to be used for. As mentioned by the legislatures that were here before, the city and 3M worked together to receive special legislation to create the authority for the district. The legislation provided the ability to create one or more districts within the project area, which is the 3M campus area. We have the ability to create this district and potentially future ones if the company so chooses and if the city so chooses. One of the special legislation or one of the special authorities that was provided was that the finding of blight is removed. The district that is being proposed is a redevelopment district. Traditionally, a redevelopment district requires the finding of blight. The legislative authority that was provided removes that requirement, that specific blight levels be found on a property. And additionally, it removed what's known as the 90% rule, which is pertinent to a redevelopment district in that traditionally 90% of the TIF dollars have to be used to remove costs that created the blight. With removal of the blight finding, they can then remove what is known as the 90% rule. Additionally, the legislation and the authority required that 100% of the TIF dollars created by the TIF district be spent within the project area, which is the 3M campus. So all the money has to be spent within that area for public and private purposes, aside from the city's ability to spend up to 10% on administrative expenses. And a couple technical rule changes where the 5-year rule is moved to 10 years. This rule allows the city to enter into additional obligations within the project area over a longer period of time than traditionally required. And the 4-year rule moved to 1 year. And the 4-year rule requires activity to occur within the TIF district, development to occur within 4 years. In this case, we moved it to 1 year to require that the development occurs almost immediately. So hopefully you can see this on your monitors, tiny in the handout. But this is a map that shows both the project area and the TIF district boundary. The red line here is the entire 3M campus. That's the parcel as a whole. And if you're not aware, the 3M campus is a single parcel. It's one PID, one parcel. And so what we wanted to do in order to minimize the potential impact of having a district that is having property that is in a TIF district have a frozen land value, we wanted to minimize the area that was actually in a TIF district. So what 3M is going to do, and they're going to propose a lot split to the city, is the segregation out of this yellow boundary here. This yellow boundary here is the TIF district boundary itself. That is going to be the area in which the R&D facility is being constructed. That is the area in which the land value will be frozen. So what we're really doing is minimizing the amount of value that's frozen by the TIF district to as small of an area as possible, allowing the main 3M campus to fluctuate with property valuations over time as the market dictates. In doing so, we've created what is now the TIF district area and then the larger project areas. The TIF district itself is the yellow area, the project area is the red area. 100% of the property, or the tax increment generated, has to be spent within that project area and the adjacent right-of-way. So both public and private improvement costs can occur in that area. So the city's infrastructure improvements associated with the fire station wall outside of the TIF district are occurring within the larger project area. To outline a couple of the specific points that are in the TIF plan, that's the next section of the presentation. We're going to talk about the term. A redevelopment district has a 25-year term by statute. It's 25 years after the date of first receipt of increment, so it's actually 26 years in total, and the district is projected to have a duration of 2015 through 2040. In order to qualify as a redevelopment district, the city sought the special legislation that removed the need for the blight, and it also removed the 90% rules that were previously discussed. The TIF plan outlines the total amount of tax increment revenues that are projected to be generated within the district. Over the life of the district, based on the market value assumption, we're assuming in a 2% market value inflator, the total tax increment generated potentially over the life of the district is almost $25 million. The TIF plan also outlines the potential costs that can be incurred. An important thing to remember with the TIF plan is it outlines, the TIF plan provides the authority for the city to create a tax increment district. The development agreement actually implements said authority. So the tax increment plan provides budget authority up to $25 million, or approximately $25 million, based on the tax increment revenues generated. And on this chart here, you can see the $9.56 million that's being proposed as the private development costs to be reimbursed to 3M on a pay-as-you-go basis. Associated with that is the interest cost. And then finally, you'll see the $4.9 million of public improvement dollars that are the budget allocation for public improvement dollars of up to $4.9 million. That's the city's portion of expenses that they can incur within the project area based on the tax increment revenue projections. And just remember, the total private investment in the project itself is $156 million. One of the things that the legislature and the statute requires that we include within our TIF plans is a hypothetical impact on the other taxing jurisdictions. And what this is it's a hypothetical impact, and what we have to calculate is what would the decrease in the tax rate be for each of the taxing jurisdictions if the project were to occur without the use of TIF. So we'll talk about the but-for finding later. So the relevancy of this impact statement is, based on the but-for statement, or can be converted by the but-for statement, but it is something that we are obligated to illustrate to the taxing jurisdiction as part of the TIF plan. So if the district were to happen without the use of TIF, these would be the potential local tax rate decreases. Again, relatively small amounts for the county and school district. All right, so to move into the development agreement, as I mentioned, the development agreement actually outlines the implementation of the agreement and actually memorializes the development and the assistance that will be provided. One of the things that we talked about previously was the capturing of the fiscal disparity portion of the TIF revenue. The development agreement and then the TIF revenues that are in the TIF plan do include that fiscal disparities portion as a portion of the tax increment revenue, and it does result in a greater TIF revenue. The offset of that is it may result in a slightly increased tax rate. The calculation that's been provided is that the potential increase in the tax rate would potentially be equivalent to a levy increase of $85,000 annually. In return for the fiscal disparities portion being captured as tax increment and the greater TIF revenue being provided to both the city and the private portions, the company is committed to obtaining one or more building permits with a total cost of $50 million by 2021. And that does not include the R&D facility. So in return for that portion of the tax increment being generated, substantial additional development will occur within the project area. And if that development does not occur, the fiscal disparities portion will be taken out of the revenue from that point forward, and then at which point there will be no revenue. And the one thing I want to talk about, the impact that we've illustrated, is the maximum impact that could potentially be realized. Not to go too far into the weeds on fiscal disparities, but the cities that are in the fiscal disparities area make contributions to the pool, but they also get money back from the pool. The city of Maplewood is a net contributor to the pool. They put money into the pool, but they do get money back, but it's not quite as much as they put in. The $85,000 is only looking at the first half of that example. It's only looking at the contribution. The likelihood, based on the current formulas and the current way the fiscal disparities program is that as a result of that increased contribution, there will likely be some distribution back to the city as a result of that, thus lowering that impact from what we've illustrated. We've only illustrated one half of the equation, just the contribution side. So there's likely to be some contribution coming back, which will soften that impact from what we've illustrated. Finally, we've talked about how does the tax increment revenue get split between the company and the city, and the development agreement proposes a pay-as-you-go agreement and a principal amount of $9.5, almost $9.6 million. So over the life of the district, 3M will be reimbursed for private costs of $9.6 million as tax increment revenue is generated. The only obligation that they have to get repaid that amount is from 80% of the TIF. If the tax increment comes in at a lower revenue or lower rate than previously projected, there's no obligation of the city to provide further tax dollars to help offset that decrease. The only obligation is that 80% of the money that is generated being used to repay that principal amount over the term of the district, and that's what's known as a pay-as-you-go. So the note will have will have a non-compounding interest rate of 5%, and 80% of the tax increment dollars will be used to repay that. As a result of that, the city now has 20% of the revenue that's generated by the TIF district available to be used to fund eligible public improvements within the project area. So far, we've already outlined $1.25 million worth of TIF eligible expenses associated with the fire department building itself. Over the life of the district, we've estimated the net present value of that 20% to be $2.3 million. So potentially, depending on how tax increment comes in over time, there is potential that other additional public improvements could be could be undertaken within the district. Finally, one of the things that state law requires with a tax increment district of this type is that a business subsidy agreement be entered into. This is outlined within the development agreement. What the business subsidy agreement requires is that 3M provide both a job and a wage goal. 3M has provided that they will commit to retaining 700 jobs within the TIF district, and that those 700 jobs that are retained within the district will have an hourly wage of $50 an hour. In the event that those goals are not met, the development agreement outlines the terms on which the TIF that has been paid would be repaid back to the city. So only in the event that these job and wage goals are met will TIF be provided to the developer. And finally, while it's not outlined in this agreement, we've discussed before that the company has agreed to pay all the required planning and building fees, including a $285,000 park availability charge. Each of those points will be in the site plan agreement that comes before you at a later date, but we did want to point them out as their additional deal points that have been previously discussed. So finally, there's a couple findings that are made as part of the adoption of the resolution approving the TIF district. The first finding is that the TIF plan affords a maximum opportunity for development within the city. The second finding is that the TIF plan conforms to the general plans for development of the city as a whole. Last week, we were in front of the Planning Commission having them adopt a resolution, asking them to adopt a resolution supporting that finding. And finally, another finding is that the project will qualify as a redevelopment TIF district, and it will in this case as defined by the special legislation. Another one of the important findings that's made in the TIF plan and through the adoption of the resolution is that the project would not occur but for the use of tax increment assistance. It's commonly referred to as the but-for test. That the project would not occur but for the TIF. Outlined in the but-for finding as outlined in the TIF plan includes statement that the project will result in substantial development. There will be substantial activity occurring within the TIF district, and the company has previously testified in front of the state legislature that the 700 jobs that will be housed in the R&D facility will be retained on the campus within the city, and they will not be relocated to other companies or other facilities within the company. Additionally, one of the things that's stated in the development agreement that will be signed by both parties is that the project would not be undertaken by the company without the financial assistance provided by the TIF. So based on both of these pieces of information, the city can make the finding that it has no reason to believe the development would occur but for the use of TIF. And the final finding that has to be made per state statute is that the increased market value that could reasonably expect to occur without the TIF would be less than the increase in market value as a result of the proposed development after subtracting the total subsidy. So this market value test is that because TIF is being used, the amount of value that's being generated on the site is a lot greater than what would otherwise occur. Because we made the determination that the project would not occur but for the assistance, we would assume that very limited growth would happen on the site. Considering the post-development growth is a $156 million investment minus a relatively small proportion of TIF, we assume, or we make the finding that the market value growth on the site is substantially greater because of the TIF than it would otherwise be. So that outlines both key points in the TIF plan, key points in the development agreement, and then the findings that are part of the resolution. And I guess with that, I'll turn it over for questions.
In one of your last slides, under the but-for finding, it says the company has indicated in testimony to state legislation that 700 jobs housed in the R&D facility will be retained on the 3M campus. So that's in stone? In other words, once they said that that's what they're going to do, they have to do it, correct?
Yes, correct, and that's also part of the business subsidy agreement. It's basically saying the same thing and requiring the same thing in writing and being signed, being attested to that they will be retaining those 700 jobs on the campus, and they will be meeting that job wage goal as outlined. And in the event that they don't, there's an adjustment according to the tax increment revenue.
So how do we go about verifying what wages are paid to people over the years there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As outlined in the development agreement, and Mayor can speak to it more if you need further clarification. There is a procedure that is outlined as part of the development agreement where the company will provide verification, submit documentation on an annual basis after the first couple of years, indicating that they have met these job wage goals. And these number of jobs and that they are retained on the site. So documentation is provided annually as part of that, or is required annually as part of that.
Okay. Other questions? for the moment? Thank you for now.
Thank you.
Appropriate to open the public hearing, and then I can discuss the resolutions to be adopted after the public hearings, unless you have any additional questions.
Actually, we do have a couple of commission reports I think we want to get in before that. And then, Mr. Shea, do you have anything that you particularly want to add, or is this here in case?
No, I do not. Tom is very well.
Okay. I think we do have two commissioners here, Mr. Triplett from the Planning Commission.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, City staff, my name is Dale Triplett. I'm here on behalf of the Planning Commission. We discussed this at our last meeting, or at a meeting, the previous meeting. We found that the proposed project did meet the objective of the comprehensive plan. One issue that we did talk about somewhat, we were somewhat concerned about if we give 3M the special treatment of giving them this TIF, how can we know that they're not going to get this special money and sell the business and walk away or not fulfill their part of the bargain? And as the gentleman just pointed out, and as the city manager pointed out in our meeting, that's all taken care of. If they don't meet their goals and they don't meet their stated agreement, then that money has to be reimbursed back to the city. So when that was resolved, we voted ayes all to pass this. Recommend the city council adopt the TIF.
Okay. Thank you very much.
As your question about the wages, if they have 700 people there, if they just have the CEO in there, then everybody else can make $1 an hour, and it's still $50 an hour.
I considered that, but I'm thinking that's probably not how it would actually work. He's got his own office in another bigger building. And then Mr. Jenkins from the Housing and Economic Development Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff. My name is Mark Jenkins. I'm representing the Housing and Economic Development Commission. We discussed the same proposal everyone's heard today at our last meeting, and the commission passed it 3-1. And the primary reasons for passing it were, first, the new building is not going to have a significant impact on city services. Second reason, approving the building doesn't only preserve 700 jobs, but it also prevents the relocation of 700 area residents who spend their money at Maplewood's small businesses and support our community. And then, of course, I was doing some quick math. That accounts for about $72 million per year in regional income based on $50 per hour rate, assuming people only work 40 hours a week. The final TIF proposal did drop TIF financing directly for Maplewood buildings, which, as council may know, was sort of a hot button issue for our Business and Economic Development Commission. Seeing that that was dropped at the legislature, we felt comfortable continuing our support for it. And another important thing was that 3M agreed to pay all of the fees associated with the approval process. So they're still paying to go through the whole process, and we were comfortable with that as well. And then lastly, and this is probably more a personal note, TIF financing for multinational corporations to keep or protect those businesses or attract them to your part of the country is a tool that cities need to use. And 3M has been such a huge asset to Minnesota and to Maplewood that seeing all of the other points we made here, I think it's a win-win across the board for 3M, Maplewood, and the rest of our business community here in the city. With that, if there are any questions?
Just one, you said it was a 3-1 vote. What was the reason that somebody didn't vote?
The one person who didn't vote for it basically said he wasn't opposed or in favor. There was a lot of numbers, and anyone who's just sat through this Springstead presentation, let alone gone through all the documentation, there were a lot of numbers to put together, and he was just not comfortable with the total package at that point. He had expressed if there would be another meeting of our commission before this, he'd be prepared to take a stand on it. I'm trying to remember, I believe, Mike, it was actually an abstention. So there was 3 votes in favor, 1 abstention. I don't have the minutes from that meeting yet, but it was 3 in favor and 1.
It is a lot to take in for the audience that's here. We've seen this, we've had, Tom come up here numerous times and give us, pieces of it, and you just saw the whole thing tonight. So this isn't our first time looking at all this, so otherwise it would be kind of crazy.
And the packet with all the other stuff that's not in the PowerPoint is
Yeah.
mighty big. But Tom did a fantastic job summing it up for us tonight. That.
Oh, okay. I guess we're covered.
Thank you very much.
So at this point, I would go ahead and open the public hearing, so I will. So I've opened the public hearing. We did have our sign-up sheet in the back of the room. Nobody signed up. And so I'm just giving this opportunity in case you had just missed the opportunity to sign up and you didn't want to say something. Here would be your time. So I'll just pause a little bit just to make sure that if anybody's slow at getting up, anybody out there wants to say anything? All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing. And so, that council, it's up to us to determine our course of action. Would you like to talk about the resolutions, Mrs. Cole? Should we understand what it is we're doing?
First resolution approves the development program, which is the development program for the existing development district number 1, of which the 3M campus is part of that development district from a geographical standpoint. So it approves the modification to development program for development district number 1. It establishes the tax increment financing district number 1-12. It approves the tax increment financing plan for that district. And it identifies the findings that Mr. Dunaway set forth for you in the resolution. So that's the first action this evening.
Well, so I would make a motion to move forward the resolution that approves an application to the development program for the development district number 1 and establishes the tax increment financing district number 1-12 and approves the tax increment financing plan. And so with that, right spot. So I made a motion. It was seconded by Ms. Juenemann. And usually I like to refer to the pages in our book. So, okay, so this one starts on page 92 and goes through page 95. Steve, did you have a comment or question? So, we have that motion before us. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. It's ayes all, and it passes. I should note that Mr. Cardinal is not present at the moment, and so that's a 4-0 vote. Would you like to talk about the next step?
The second resolution authorizes the execution of the tax increment financing development agreement, which again, Mr. Dunaway set forth the terms of that agreement. Radium agrees to build the facility, the city agrees to reimburse costs of that facility on a pay-as-you-go basis from 80% of the tax increment. Radium agrees to retain 700 jobs at an average wage of $50 per hour. The agreement provides that they have to certify this annually until those job retention goals have been met. In addition, those job retention goals are given over to the Department of Employment and Economic Development for their records. So that is the resolution, the second resolution.
All right, so I would move the resolution that starts on page 97 in our packet and ends on page 98 in our packet. And that resolution is the resolution that authorizes the execution of the tax increment financing development agreement. And so I made the motion. It was seconded by Mr. Copeland. Is there further discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And it passes 4-0. And again, just noting for the record that Mr. Cardinal is absent at the moment. And then the final step?
It's a resolution that Finance Director Dale Baumann has prepared. It's a resolution which authorizes an interfund loan resolution in connection with this tax increment financing district. One of the rules of tax increment financing is that if the city is going to finance costs and then reimburse itself from tax increment, which is proposed here in connection with some of the public improvements and site improvements associated with the fire station, if you're going to reimburse yourself from future increments from this project, you have to adopt an interfund loan resolution. And that is what's before you this evening.
All right.
Second.
All right, Mr. Juenemann has made a motion. It was seconded by Mr. Copeland. And that motion can be found in our packet starting on page 100. And
Approving the interfund loan agreement.
yep. And so it's on page 100 through 101. And so it is the interfund loan agreement that we are arranging, having to do with this district number 1-12. Questions? Comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 4-0. Thank you.
Mayor and council, I believe that 3M companies that are prepared to pull the grading permit and start work almost immediately. I think they've started some of the utility improvements, so Mr. Shea would tell us that this project is going to get going right away.
We need to approve our funding internally. We still got some steps to go. Please, thank you.
I think that the city would like to just express our appreciation to 3M. This has been a long process for both entities involved, and probably during the negotiations had some interesting moments. But I think that we felt all along that we would eventually get to a point of resolution that was satisfactory to both parties. And so we are, of course, very happy to have 3M in our city, and that we, over the past few years, seem to have even enhanced our relationship, and so are just very appreciative of the chance to partner with a company of the stature of 3M.
I'd also like to point out to the gentleman from 3M that since you are always trying to be an environmentally friendly company, you might be to know that Maplewood is now at step 3 of the Green Step program, to be the Green Step City, so you're in the right place.
All right, we'll move on then. The next thing that is on our agenda is also a public hearing. And so it's a public hearing on the capital improvement plan for 2014 through 2018, and then the issuance of capital improvement bonds. And so, is this Ms. Baumann? Boy.
Mayor and Council. Yeah, it's like anyway, 30, so I'm going to get through this.
Dry it.
So, Mayor and Council, tonight we are here to go over the 2014 to 2018 capital improvement plan. We'll be holding a public hearing and then asking for approval of the CIP plan and the issuance of CIP bonds for the fire department. How we got here is back on June 10th, we had a workshop with the council where we did a review of the CIP and we went over a debt analysis for the city. In June and July, the commissions, all the different commissions reviewed the CIP plan, and I believe it was passed by all commissions. There are some here tonight who will have comments or on the discussion that was had with the commissions at that time. July 16th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing, and they did find that the CIP plan proposed tonight is consistent with the comp plan. Tonight, July 22nd, we're asking for adoption of it. And then, depending on the outcome of the CIP bonds in late 2013 or early 2014, we would be coming back and asking for approval to issue CIP bonds. What does it mean to adopt a CIP? We're not authorizing the expenditures tonight. This is merely a plan for the next 5 years. And as priorities change, we put this plan together every year because as priorities change, we may need to take a project out or add something different in because different things are happening in our city. This is what we know right now, what we expect for the next 5 years. Each item in the plan would need to be brought back to the council prior to spending any dollars. So, like I said, we're not authorizing any spending tonight. We're implementing a plan that we can help run our city over the next 5 years. And CIP adoption is required prior to selling any bonds if that's the direction we choose to go with this. Now, back on June 10th, we did a detailed review of this, so I'm going to move quickly through this. I'll touch on a couple points from that meeting, but I'm not going to go through everything. The CIP this year is pretty substantial decrease from the one last year. And there were two main reasons for that. And one was the Highway 36 and English project was included in last year's CIP. And because it's currently underway, it's no longer included in our 5-year plan because it's an ongoing project. That was $16.2 million. The other thing is we are refocusing our efforts, and we made a shift in our focus from an accelerated streets program to looking at controlling our debt level. So the streets aspect of the CIP plan has been reduced from 2014 to 2018. When I talk about the debt analysis, there are some internal policies that we're looking at, and one of them has to do with the ratio of the debt service fund levies combined with the capital expenditure levies to the total levies. Our target is 15 to 25%. And the reason this policy is in place is to ensure that we do spend money on infrastructure. So going a little over it from time to time is not a bad thing. It's saying that we are investing in the city. First I want to show you, based on the proposed debt CIP, the capital levy for 14, this is where we're at right now, and this could change. I mean, we're still working on the budget. The CIP flows into the budget, but we're looking at about $105,000 increase in the levy. So what that ratio debt capital levy is to total levy for 2013 is 26.7%, and we're expecting a decline a little bit in 2014 if that proposal goes through with what we are seeing right now today for the 2014 levy. As I said, exceeding this target does not have a negative impact on the city as long as it doesn't continue indefinitely. And the reason we don't want it to continue indefinitely is because it could put a strain on our operations, and we don't want to do that. The City Council did make a conscious decision to put more funding toward infrastructure, and we have been able to maintain city operations while doing that. The other internal debt policy that we look at is the one that has to deal with the fund balance in the debt service funds. And We target that to be a minimum level of 50% of debt service expenditures. And the reason for that is because our debt service payments are made February 1st and August 1st each year. So at year end, at December 31st, we want to have enough money in the debt service funds to make that February 1st payment. Beginning in 2016, based on current projections, we will not be able to maintain this minimum fund balance level without a significant increase in the debt levy. What will happen is we will need to borrow money during the year from other funds to pay our debt service expenditures, but the debt service funds will pay interest expense on those borrowings. And at the end of the year, the debt service funds will have a positive fund balance. It's just not sufficient to make the payments on February 1st and August 1st because we receive our tax levies in December, in July, December. By year end, we will have positive fund balance. This is not an ideal situation to bring the fund balance level down, but going against the policy in the short term is a better alternative than having a large levy increase. Because this is something that's a timing issue and it will work itself out over a few years, we don't recommend doing a large levy increase to do it. And there are a couple of things that help us out here is with the new legislation, as we heard earlier tonight, the city is going to be receiving, or should be receiving, about $530,000 of LGA money in 2014. And as we talked about on July 10th, city staff is recommending to apply that towards the debt service in order to keep those fund balance levels up. And also the sales tax exemption is coming back into play, where we're anticipating about $75,000 going to be for operations, but it could potentially be $200 to $250 total citywide savings to the city. Now, based on my projections, this is where the debt service fund balance levels come. As you can see, by 2018, I'm projecting them to drop to 1.2 million. So that would be the balance on December 31st, 2018, which is only 13% of debt service expenditure costs. So that's significantly below the 50% level. If we were to apply the LGA monies to debt service every year, the lowest we could get is 42%, which is much closer to the 50%. And after 2018, the fund balance starts to come back up because we've eliminated so much debt in the city. Our payments out won't be as much. So then we can look at applying that LGA money to other parts of the city. One other thing, in the back of your package, before I get to the next slide, I did include again the original request from the departments and the changes that were made through our meetings with the different department heads to come down to the final number for the CIP. One of the other things we're here for tonight is to consider the issuance of up to $4 million of CIP bonds to finance any funding gaps that we may have with the 3 projects related to the fire stations. The authority for the bond issuance, if it's approved, is only in effect for 1 year or until the adoption of the next CIP. So if we issue the CIP earlier next year, that authority would run out. It's not a forever thing. It doesn't stay in place forever. With CIP bonds, the action tonight only authorizes the sale to occur. It does not authorize the actual sale. What we would do is, as I stated earlier, is later in 2013 or 2014, once we know what the funding gap is, we would come back and ask for approval to issue CIP bonds. I put up to $4 million because that's about what we anticipate the cost of the fire station is going to be. We do have other funding mechanisms for it, which will reduce it, but until we know for sure what all those other funding mechanisms are, we won't know exactly how much we need to issue a CIP bond for. But we anticipate it's going to be less than the $4 million, but we just want authority to go up to that amount in case something else happens. And then Minnesota statute 475.521 outlines 8 criteria that must be met prior to issuing bonds. These are all listed within the CIP document on the project pages and then within your agenda report tonight. The CIP document can be found on the city's website, and also there's a copy at the back of the room for public viewing tonight. So from tonight, what we're looking is, first of all, we're going to receive reports from the commissions. I'm not sure which all commissions are here, but we did have some comments from the Environmental and Natural Resources Commission. They had questions regarding the joint powers agreement with the East Metro Fire Training Facility, questions regarding the park systems plan, the pond cleanout dredging projects, and then the Living Streets policy. And then the Planning Commission had some comments regarding, first of all, some of the descriptions within the project pages of the document, the park system plan, and then the streets program. And staff did comment on all of the questions and talk to them about it, and I don't know if they're going to make any comments on those specific issues tonight or if we answered all their questions that they had. But we'll receive those reports, conduct a public hearing, and then we're recommending adoption of the resolution, which 3 votes are required to adopt the CIP plan for 2014 to 2018 and authorize the capital improvement plan bonds.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions on the staff report? Ms. Juenemann?
It's not for Gail, however, I think it might be for Chuck. It's not for Chuck, it's for Michael. Under the declined future use years on our request sheet, there are some street projects that are being postponed. And if there are people who are inquiring as to when the streets are going to be done, or why aren't they going to be done when we first said and that type of thing, what do we, to whom do we refer that?
Mayor and City Council, I'd be happy to discuss any of the improvements preceding or the ones that declined and why they may have been declined. So call me anytime at the office.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the staff report? Should be noted that many of the commissions that we have did discuss this topic, and we have, again, there are 2 commissioners that are aware of that are here tonight. And so if you guys want to give your reports.
Mayor, members of the council, city staff, Dale Tripler, and notes I put on my other badge. So,
Oh, good.
I could start off with the Environmental Commission because we heard that at our May 20th meeting. As Gail has already indicated, took all my thunder. The staff did come in at a subsequent meeting and address all the issues that we had raised and to the satisfaction of the commission. So the Environmental Commission was approved of the passage of the CIP, or of the CIP. Now I'm going to go to the Planning Commission unless anybody has any questions about the Environmental Commission. Okay. The Planning Commission first heard this issue at a June 18th meeting, and a number of issues were raised. There was some question about appropriate funding for the Maplewood City Community Center, the day-to-day operation and maintenance. Also concerns about the laying of road projects, patching on top of patching, that sort of thing. Also, there was a request for having more specific language in some of the descriptions about what was being done, particularly the fire stations. It seemed to be like one boilerplate was applied to the 3 different fire stations instead of actually talking about each one individually. There was a question about gear management cost. I don't know if it was there or not. There was also some concerns about some of the things that were in the description about the individual parks that were listed in the CIP. Specifically designating that certain activities were going to be put in or upgraded or whatever, and there was a question about, well, you know, the City Council has appointed a Parks Task Force, which I'm serving on, and if you already know what you're going to do, then why are we meeting? So we basically recommended, because of all of our concerns, that we table it and sort of give staff time to go back and address some of our concerns. So on July 16th, we met again, and the issue of the CIP came up. And I think staff went through our concerns and addressed them individually to the satisfaction of the planning commission. And I won't go through those all again, but I think all of our questions were answered. When we voted, it was ayes all except for one. One of the commissioners voted nay, and when asked why, he said it was just way too much information, too complicated, just couldn't digest it all, and didn't want to vote on something he didn't really fully understand the grasp. So.
The way I have a lot of elected officials who just vote without having a clue what they're voting about. So. Any questions for the report?
Question.
We're good with you, I guess, and you have a question having to do with something
I have a
else?
question that came out of something he said.
Okay.
Maybe we should explain to the public, the one issue that he said they had on the planning commission, why would you have parks program or projects in the CIP when you have a task force trying to decide the future of parks and the park plan? So maybe we could answer that.
Well, maybe I can go ahead and try that, because I'm on the Parks Task Force. And as Gail indicated, the CIP is a planning document. You need to indicate that there's activities that are going to go on, and you do your best to try to think what they might be. It doesn't mean that if you say they're going to put in a volleyball court, that that's necessarily what they're going to do. That's sort of what they think now. And so the task force is still very valuable. There's a lot more we need to do than just figure out what kinds of activities we need in the parks. I think the most important thing we're doing, the reason I want to be on, is because we need to find a different funding mechanism. The one we have doesn't work.
But I think it's an important thing for people to realize that the CIP is a planning document.
Right.
You have to have plans for all your operations, so there's no point in being in existence. That doesn't mean they're unchangeable.
Right. And I think that was mainly my concern in some of the descriptions. That I was afraid that if people pulled this up on the internet and they read it, and they read the same description for all 3 fire stations, for example, they would say, well, are you really going to do exactly the same thing at Hazelwood as you are at number 1, as you are at Gladstone? And in fact, the description didn't even say anything about what was going to happen. It was just saying that the city needed to upgrade these fire stations. So I was just afraid that the public would get a misconception about what the document was about. We were assured by the city staff that in the next document, next year, that the description would be more specific to the activities.
It sounds to me, though, like you're kind of, on one hand, you're saying, when you're talking about the parks activities and that type of thing, that they seem too specific. And then the fire station part, not specific enough. So I'm sure they'll do their best to clarify those directions. But the other thing that I would think nobody mentioned is that, of course, the task force is looking at, what's going to happen to our parks over the next 20 years. And so this is a planning document for the next 5 years, which we've already said is not intended to be the exact blueprint of what's going to happen, but trying to do our best to say we're going to need to spend some money over here, and we're thinking we're going to do this. So.
Yeah, and I guess I should have stressed a little bit more that there was a lot of discussion about roads. There were many planning commission members who live in areas where the roads apparently are deteriorating. Concerned about the fact that they're just being patched over patched over patched. And Michael came to the meeting to explain that the city has a process that it goes through. And I think once he went through that, explaining that process, then it didn't, hopefully it didn't seem like it was just sort of a random number generator kind of thing, where you spin a wheel and throw a dart.
Yeah, we eliminated the dark right a while ago.
Good.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jenkins?
Mayor, council members, Mark Jenkins again. I'll apologize, this one won't be as detailed because it was another commission member who was preparing notes for this report. So I'll give you what I could scrape out of the back of my brain and what I could remember of the meeting. One of the things that's a common element already you've heard is we also shared the concerns with the scaling back of infrastructure, specifically street improvements, but also wanted to reflect the concern of how that would also impact improvements to public utilities. Oftentimes, whether it's water, electrical, and that stuff, those improvements are scheduled simultaneously with road work. So we expressed our concerns on that and made sure that staff knew that we would be hopeful that we wouldn't see increased costs because of not just the overlays, but because of spot repairs to water mains that maybe should be taken care of on a full street project. The rest of it, though, is we fully support the focus on the debt service, and we were very comfortable with the bonding. We thought it was a very appropriate use of bonding. So those are the big three things that I can recall from that meeting.
Okay. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that it might be worth noting that a couple of groups that I serve on, Mr. Jenkins was talking about our water pipes and that type of thing, and the water utility has actually come a long way in the last few years in that it was real questionable when we were doing our big surge of street projects as to whether we'd get them to replace the pipes or not. And we, of course, want the pipes replaced so that they don't dig up the streets just after we fix them. And it was very questionable to talk about somebody throwing a dart, but that group has moved and meant an increase in rates. But now I believe, anyway, that they're stepping up and saying they'll do all the pipes on any projects we come up with. And of course, we're scaling back on a project, so bad timing. But they've taken a new philosophy, and they were on a pace where their old philosophy was going to replace all their pipes about every 150 years. And the pipes don't last quite that long, and so obviously that's not a sustainable pace. So we do have a public hearing, and so we're going to open that. And I did have a list of 2 people who had signed up, so we'll start with them. And so the first one is Paula, who lives on Lakewood Drive.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council staff members. My name is Paula Ahern. I live at 1142 Lakewood Drive South. I lived there since 1997. Our house was built in 1994, and our street is in major repair need. It's been patched and repatched, as the gentleman before talked about it in the commission. I brought some pictures along to show the City Council. I've talked with the Assistant City Engineer, Mike Love, to understand what this project will mean for our neighborhood. I live on near Fish Creek and near Pleasant View Park. This project is not due to be repaired till 2015, finishing in 2016. I'm asking the council to please consider moving that date out for our neighborhood. And I'll have the pictures to show.
Okay. And are you tell us who you are.
I'm Mel Gross, 1169 Lakewood Drive South,
Okay.
neighbors. I'd just like to reiterate, the streets are in pretty bad shape. Breaking apart, especially during the winter time when we have the plows come through in the spring. It's our grass is pretty much covered with blacktop. There's numerous potholes right now. Some are bigger than a foot wide, more than 4 inches deep. It's a road that we drive on every single day, at least 2 to 3 times a day. We have school buses that come up and down that road at least 8 times a day. The roads themselves are in pretty bad shape, and I'd invite you to come out and drive on and see how it works for your vehicle. I know my vehicle repair cost of one tire of $500. from hitting a pothole on Carver, unfortunately. But please come out and drive on the road and see if you want to drive on that road 2-3 times a day. Thank you for your time.
So just to, I think we talked with Steve. And so, did he explain how we rate the streets and that type of thing? So you understand the process that we use?
Yes, he did, and he sent me, I have the picture of the whole project, of the diagram, and so I'm familiar with that.
Okay. And so I would love to cut the picture straight, and I'm sure the rest of the council would also. And so we have a little bit of an issue in that, and I think it was in the 90s when really for a decade the councils then did not do anything having to do with the streets. And so a while back when we got into the recession, actually it was a good thing for doing street projects because streets were cheap. And so we did as many as we could, twice as many per year as normal. And so what do we got, 135 miles of roads? And so a street project consists of maybe 4, maybe 5.
If our project is 2.2 miles, I believe.
Yeah, well, and we normally do a neighborhood around, but, oh, you're talking about the one listed in the CIP. Okay. So anyway, we spent and spent and spent, and as has been talked about several times tonight, now we are trying to make sure that we pay our bills. And so we are, one of the things we talked about earlier in the night, I think you guys have been here pretty much for the whole meeting, was the start of the budget process. And so really that would be the place, if you want to try to have some influence, to get your neighborhood to rally and say, please do our street. You do know how the program works, that we assess you, right? What was our assessment this year?
Mayor and city council, for a full reconstruction, it's about $6,600. But again, I want to reiterate, it's based on an appraisal.
Right.
So that's just a guideline.
Right. So if you can get your neighbors to call us all up and say, we know you're working on the budget, we want our street done. And sooner than you're planning on it, you might have some impact. But like I say, as we talked tonight, I think my position was we got to do option number 1, which is the 0 levy increase. But I then said I don't like it. And I don't like it because we need to do more street work, we need to do more park work. And so, anybody else want to comment? I guess so.
Can I
Go
ask
ahead.
one question?
Second.
Is that in the form of petition or just calling?
Well, that would be one way, a petition. It's the most official way. We can officially receive it, and it would go into the record. But if you get a bunch of people to constantly bug us at home, that's good too.
All right. My question is for staff. Michael, now that we know that, there might be children missing in potholes down there, is there something, I don't know how often our city goes through those streets like that, but is there something we could fill in the meantime?
Yeah, Mayor and council, absolutely. We go through all of our streets a couple times a year. First right in the spring when they're really bad, and then we come back through and do a more official, smoothed out patch. But I have these 2 addresses written down, so certainly I will talk to our crews to make another trip down there and see what they can do in this interim period.
Thank you.
Mr.
I just want to double check your addresses again, what blocks were these?
I'm on 1142 Lakewood Drive South.
Your
I'm on 1160 Line Lakewood Drive.
I give the pictures to the public
Sure.
works.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Those are something we can keep?
Yes.
Okay. And then Cardinal?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to make you feel any better, but Michael Thompson probably could tell you what number street in the worst condition is right now. Is theirs the worst? No. There's worst street. How far down are they?
Mayor and council, if it gives you an idea, Arkwright Sunrise, the neighborhood up by 36 County B, was the worst streets with a rating on a 1 to 100 scale, but it's as low as low 30s. And then Lakewood Sterling, I would say this is the second or third next worst neighborhood.
So you're right in there. So I'm sure you're thrilled.
Yeah,
So you're close.
after 25 years of not having a state.
So by 2015, we might be number one.
We're number 1. Does that area include the street that we talked about earlier tonight, or no? What
was the other street we talked about?
Well, it was off of Sterling by the water tower. That was the hilltop?
Mayor and council, actually that was a decline project that went into 2019.
Yeah.
And actually, I should note that the revised CIPs, since we delayed the Arkwright Sunrise Street by 1 year, that Lakewood Sterling, I believe, was pushed to 2016 for construction. So what I'm hearing tonight is street acceleration.
Get your neighbors to rally around your effort and do your best.
We will, thank you.
I think everybody here wants to make sure our infrastructure is in good a shape as we can make it.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we'll figure that out on paper.
Yeah.
Those were the only 2 people who signed up. Is there anybody else out there who wanted to comment on the capital improvement plan? Anyone else that wanted to comment on the capital improvement plan? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Council, what's your pleasure? We do have a resolution that would approve the plan and would also approve the issuance of the capital improvement bonds. Mr. Juenemann.
I'm in staff recommendation approving the 2014-2018 capital improvement plan and the issuance of capital improvement bonds.
All right, we have a motion that was made by Ms. Juenemann. It was seconded by Mr. Copen. And the exact verbiage for the resolution starts on page 151 in our packet and goes through page 152. And it is the approval of the plan and the issuance of the bonds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes ayes all. All right. We've had a request that we have just a brief recess. We've been sitting down for a number of hours, and we'll get you people and move along as quickly as possible, but we're going to be back in our seats here and ready to go at 2 minutes after 9.
No, you were walking down with no. Problem in the back. There's only 2
Gail says that she's struggling with her game. She thinks she was no way. It's just a walk on the bus. Okay. That's as good as it gets.
Well, they are.
I know.
Okay.
Thanks, Gail.
Yeah.
See you Wednesday morning.
Yep. two more issues I have.
Boy, you're still.